Communications Supervisor within the Emergency Services Department.
So moved.
Second?
And yes?
And the second resolution is approving the promotion of Jennifer Key to the position of Emergency Communications Supervisor, also within the Emergency Services Department.
So
So
moved.
moved. Second.
And yes.
And then I'll make a motion to adjourn our first meeting.
Yeah, second.
And yes. And now, welcome to the March 5th work session meeting of your Board of County Commissioners. And for those of you that are new to the audience, we've got a group of students with us, and we had a nice discussion with them earlier. And first thing we have is a work session with Suzanne Mason about our community block grant program.
Tammy Boggs, I thought.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. 10 o'clock. Tammy, I'm sorry, I skipped right over you. Jonathan. Option number 3. You're never number 3 option in my book.
Thank you very much.
You are my top draft choice.
Well, thank you very much, and here I am. Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for taking the time with us. I'll tell you what we're looking for at the end, and then I'll go through and tell you why. What we're looking for is either, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, or no, that doesn't sound like a good idea to pursue. So that's what we like. We're coordinating our thought processes is what we're doing. So in the area in the western side of Turtle Creek Township, we have several areas which 12, 15 years ago, maybe not quite that long, was converted in zoning to mixed use. Mixed use at that time, Matt Obringer was with planning. Matt really was a believer in mixed use. He came and talked with us. It sounded reasonable to put commercial and neighborhood kind of units together in some of the areas in the western side. And so we implemented that as part of the zoning. From that time till now, number one, Union Village has come in, and Union Village itself is a planned mixed-use area, which ultimately will have 4,500 homes in it, according to the plans. And so now I have mixed use in lots of parts of the western side of the township, and so they're competitive among each other and unnecessary, I think. Number two, a lot of the commercial requirements have been taken out of the text of our zoning code, and so under certain circumstances, or there are circumstances where developers are saying, well, look, this is 4 or 6 or 8 units per acre, and we're only proposing something less than that, but it's still high density with no commercial associated with it. And these areas that are proposed tend to be far back in behind subdivisions, which creates some safety problems, which we've talked about before. And so what we would like to do is revisit the issue of the mixed-use areas in Turtle Creek Township. And some of them may be wholly appropriate to keep as mixed use. Some of them may not be. There are several large tract landowners that this will impact, so it's not lots of small lots. We'd like to put together a steering committee with those large tract landowners to see what their sensitivities are, to see what they would like to see come out of zoning for their land. And once we have that, put together a preliminary plan, then bring that as a charrette to our community, so the community can have commentary on it. And then once we all come to a consensus on that, then bring that before you so that we have some sort of updated thought process. I think that the proof has been in the pudding. That property hasn't moved since we've done it, since we've put in that zoning. And I mean, property has developed, but not mixed use, in a mixed use manner at all. So nearby, traditional neighborhoods with cul-de-sacs, those have certainly been moving along Green Tree and Hendrickson. And the area that we're talking about is primarily in what we call our park district, which according to the area plan are traditional neighborhoods. And so the traditional neighborhoods, I think, fit better with what goes there. I think that'll be our long-term general vision, but there may still be some mixed-use areas or business areas, particularly along Union Road, where I think we need to take a look at housing and ways to accommodate workforce through that area as well, which, you know, we need some time to work with planning. We need to think about what this looks like. We need some time to work with the landowners out there, and we'd kind of like your blessing to pursue that before we move forward.
Gosh, we're not used to that.
So, the map that you're showing us here, and this is, I'm just trying to make sure I know, so this is where Hamilton Road meets Butler Warren.
So this is part of it, and it has some of the mixed use here.
What is the mixed use, oh, if you're, explain the color choices here and what that means.
Green is R1, which is 1 acre. Mixed use neighborhood is, I think that's 4 or 6 units per acre.
With the mixed-use neighborhood, I see what looks like the tan or the pinkish kind of color.
Yeah, the tan area is it.
That's the mixed-use neighborhood, right?
Yes, sir.
And so the green is a residential, or is that something different?
Residential, 1 acre.
Right, because it says, well, R1. And there I see the R1 on one part of the green, so that's residential 1, which means what size of residential areas? That doesn't permit commercial there, does it? An R1?
R1, no.
No. And then PR, what's PR?
Yeah, it's public.
Public?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that owned by the county or somebody else?
That one is the zoo.
Okay, that's the zoo property?
Yeah.
All right. And the zoo is the zoo property both the kind of purple in both locations of that zoo property? Because I know that zoo property is actually further over to the right there where you got Mason Montgomery Road coming in there. That is zoo property.
That's correct.
Okay, and is the other zoo, and I know that's zoo property, but is the zoo property also the first purple property too?
That's correct.
Okay, so I think I understand this. Now, why did you want to show us this picture?
This is the picture that actually was up. I think that I could have gone without pictures. There's actually 2 pictures, and the other area is kind of more pressing to me, which is the area.
John, I think if you advance the slide, the next picture, if I'm not
How about
mistaken.
this? Do I just push the arrow?
I thought that, well, at least commissioners, you have both those pictures in your packet. Can you pass that down there?
And by the way, for our students, Mr. Sams is not only a preeminent lawyer, but he is also a trustee for this particular Turtle Creek Township. So this is in Turtle Creek Township, which is one of those townships that I described before to you all. And this one is not home rule, so this body decides zoning, and that's what this is about. Go ahead. That is, this body is the commission. The commission does the zoning for Turtle Creek Township.
That's right. And planning and.
Right.
Yeah,
But Mr. Sams are you the president of your board of trustees?
I am.
Okay, so he is not only the president of the board of trustees, but frequently comes before us representing that board of trustees. And he's sort of like, we listen to him when he comes before us.
Thank you. You're very kind.
All right.
Okay, so this is the area that's further north. The blue lines there on the left of the map, that's I-75. I'm gonna part from the mic for just a moment. Green Tree, Hendrickson, Union. So, that Green Tree Road, of course, we have one corner of Green Tree and I-75, which remains within Turtle Creek Township. The white area is the city of Monroe. And if you travel to the second white area down on the east side, then that'll be Solid Rock Church, just to help orient you. If you move just across the road and just below the tan area, which is marked mixed-use neighborhood, then that will be the areas that where the Park North is, and below that is 63.
Now, do you want us to change the zoning in these areas, or any of these areas. Is that what this is about?
Not yet, but yes, we're gonna revisit, what we'd like your blessing on is our pursuit of a coordinated plan with the property owners out there, so that we can figure out how to better utilize, the property that's out there.
Is this primarily in the mixed-use neighborhood? Is
Yes,
that-
sir.
So it's the tan area that you're principally interested in?
That's correct, and then just north of there is mixed-use center, which is a little higher density even than
I
that.
see that. And so is mixed-use center or mixed-use neighborhood, what's the difference between those two?
Density of housing that can go corollary to the commercial uses.
Okay, and then, so you can put some types of commercial uses right now in this area, but you can also put in housing in this area, which would have a density depending upon whether it has sewers or not.
Right, so you can think about Marymount, and so where you have community-oriented businesses and different business-oriented zoning associated with it, but then you may have housing above it. You may have small houses with sidewalks associated with that, which is very much the vision for Union Village also. And so, number one, I think that the two areas are competitive with each other. Number two, this property has not been moving. Number three, we've had actually high-end neighborhoods that have been proposed to come into this area, which we rebuffed because the zoning wasn't good for it, and also because sewer access was difficult. So it wasn't solely because of zoning. And then ultimately, we have what's in the zoning code, but then in practicality, what happens is the developers come and they say, well, can we do a PUD or can we do something else so we can get super high density without the commercial, and then that rotates through our system and before you, creates a lot of confusion, really doesn't comport with the plans overall.
Well, you
And-
know, I think that our president, Commissioner Young, has been one of the most vocal proponents for having a balanced growth, balanced usage, bringing in both residential and commercial to have a sustainable tax base for this area. And do I take it that what you're trying to do is to get a blessing today for the changing of the zoning that promotes that type of balanced growth?
That's correct, and so, again, I've not gone through the process, and I have not talked with the owners, but I do think as a community leader, it is my responsibility to vision, and so I'll articulate what some of my rough visions are, if you like, if I may approach the map over here.
Sure.
So,
Jonathan, can you grab the microphone that's right there, please?
I can. So if you take a look right,
I saw the red light.
am I on or off? All right, so this is the traffic circle that was put in by the engineer's office 4 or 5 years ago, which has been very effective, by the way. You'll note that this is rotated a little bit to the east. That's to accommodate, for a long time, particularly starting with Pat South, it's been envisioned to take Union Road, make that a multi-lane boulevard at the primary ancillary to I-75. You already have 4 lanes, 5 lanes up here in Middletown. If you, Liberty Township has been trying to get that interchange put in on Butler Warren Road, so bring that through. You already have the bridging put in on Butler Warren Road to accommodate 4 or 5 lanes that will take you in behind where the outlet malls are. And so there's a lot of infrastructure already put in place for this 4-lane. So ultimately, I think that Union Road, not immediately, everything takes time, but ultimately, I think Union Road will probably be 4 lanes coming up. If we send 4 lanes along its current track, then all of this residential area that we're looking at, it will deteriorate their properties very significantly. We'll roll right up to their houses going through here, and we'll change the complexion of what's happening here. On the other hand, we have a lot of open property here, and so maybe the thing to do this suddenly says, you know, maybe we should take a look at some business uses. Industrial, hopefully not, but business, yeah, I think some sort of business uses, that makes sense. Green Tree Road someday will probably be an interchange. It's exactly 2 miles up to Middletown, exactly 2 miles down to Monroe. It's exactly the right distance, and so, and we know some prior projects that have been considered, on this area. And so I think that will be a highly desirable area ultimately. And so that will certainly put, more pressure than a Marymount right on the interchange. I think it doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think because what we put in for infrastructure is here for a long time, and it's expensive, and so I think we have to plan properly for what we expect is coming.
Where are sewers, and do you know what areas have sewers now that is on this map? It doesn't,
Yeah, the sewers are, so, this sewer district is Butler County. In 1954, an arrangement was made between Butler County and Warren County, where Butler County would service this, and they are servicing it. They're servicing, Shaker, they're servicing the ball fields, there's, the sports park, they're servicing, the park. So everything that is developing right now that's sewered, because of topography, is going down the hill and under the highway where 63 is, and,
so the area, part of the service territory for Butler County, and so there are areas for our students here that we do not have within our sewer coverage, even though and they're not being serviced by anybody, and they're just on septic systems. Then there are areas where we have an arrangement where we've permitted Butler County to come into Warren County to provide sewer services, and that's being done in this particular area. But so this is in a designated service territory, you're saying, Jonathan, from 1954, an agreement between Warren County and Butler County for Butler County to provide sewer services if they choose to do so in this territory.
that's correct. And so they ultimately give the thumbs up or the thumbs down as to whether we can build anything in that area or not.
Do they have capacity right now to put sewers in here and to have that be done for future development?
We're pushing their capacity. We're starting to push their capacity.
Okay. So what you're proposing is to go to the various people who own the property to see if they're amenable to changing the zoning from the current designation to a zoning that permits a higher level of commercial usage.
Not necessarily a higher level. I think that is yet to be seen. So, well, let me rephrase, a different level in certain areas of commercial usage, and in other areas, less, because those will become more traditional neighborhoods. So along Green Tree Road, right here, this I don't think is appropriate necessarily for commercial uses. We have a lot of houses that are in here, and so I think this is more traditional neighborhood through here.
Right, instead of, I mean, I don't want to get in the weeds of exactly what that future plan is. Bruce, what does this look like when we start talking about, some people are going to say it's down zoning, that now, right now, I've got mixed use, I can put pretty much anything, I can put apartments. That's some of the highest cost per acre land you could possibly get, because we're getting high-density residential. And I've seen it too many times where the developers come in, oh, we're gonna do this great plan, and what's the first thing they put before you? The apartments. Oh, and we'll build the commercial down the road. Generally, no, they don't.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I was gonna say, this is, you know, exactly what I would love to do is take away some of these high-density options, but yet, if we've already granted this, 12 years ago or something, how do we do that now?
All right, let me point something out, make it clear that the posture of where we are today and why the township is here is based on comments from this board over the last several weeks, where I basically issued a directive to zoning and planning that they were no longer to initiate map amendments if it was coming from the county, or even text amendments through the Rural Zoning Commission. The process was, or is, that we should come before the county commissioners, if that's at the staff level, or if a township wants something like Turtle Creek is asking for today, that they should come before the county commissioners and get direction, just for the simple purpose of, is this something that we want to pursue? Is this something we want to investigate? Instead of staff spending a lot of man hours working up something that you've never seen before, and then bringing it to you and you saying, who told you to do this? Why did you spend so much time on this? So this is the process that we are now following. All Trustee Sams is indicating is, do we have some direction from you? Do we have some support from you that you would like for us to investigate this? And we would engage in planning's famous fancy word, a charrette, among other things, these community meetings, these stakeholder meetings, to reach out to these, and Jonathan tells me that a lot of this land that's in brown, that's the color that I see, are large acreages owned by, you know, a few property owners, as opposed to just, you know, dozens and dozens of individual property owners, and engage in this process to see what they want. And I assume in that process, they may very well raise that exact issue, that this is taking away some property right that we currently have. You're impacting the value of our property. And it was you that did this yourself, you know, more than a decade ago, when we went through our comp rewrite and our comprehensive map amendments. So I don't think we have to get into the weeds that much today. It's more about, do you support the township and staff pursuing this and bringing it back to you once they've had the opportunity to do the due diligence of meeting with the stakeholders, et cetera?
Right, but I mean, I was thinking more on a macro level of, instead of looking specifically at this subset of properties that are zoned this way, that how big of a deal is it to change the definition of mixed-use neighborhood? You know, that to take away some of the concerns. My biggest concern is apartments and high-density residential. We have to have balanced growth, period, end of story. So is that something we should do or consider in the county-wide zoning plan, that we're changing that definition?
Well, that's your decision, but let me share my sentiment about that, if I may. And that is, I don't like that process. One community in this county that I've seen do it, it's a textbook example, was Mason. When you do a text amendment and you publish notice, how many people turn out? Generally none, because they don't have the realization, they don't realize that it could impact them. If you do it as a map amendment, then they do turn out, because under our code, we have to give them notice and they know this affects our property. But to do it via a text amendment only, a lot of times these property owners don't realize that this can have an adverse impact on our property, because you are doing the same thing, you're just doing it through a text amendment as opposed to a map amendment. So personally, you know, I want you to think about that. That's my sentiment about it. Doesn't carry any weight necessarily with you, or maybe it will, but I wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
You're my number 2 draft choice behind Jonathan, so it does carry weight.
Yeah, so I don't.
I guess I would just say, like, I believe the question that you're asking is reasonable. The fact that you are saying this isn't working for you as a community, and that you're willing to go through the process of engaging the property owners and the broader community to come forward with some sort of consensus plan to present to us. It's yet to be determined, seems incredibly reasonable. And while I don't know what that plan is going to be, I reserve my right to support it or oppose it down the road based on its merits. Why would we not support the community's request to engage in stakeholder, a stakeholder process to come forward with some consensus proposal that meets everybody's needs. I think that's ultimately what we always want, and typically with you and the township in particular, your history precedes you, and that we, at least I believe you to be forthright and open in your intentions. So from my standpoint, I hear that the mere request is you want to go down this path, you make a good argument that it's not meeting your needs, it's not developing, and I know that your intention is to have a stakeholder process. Okay, I'm for you. And I'd like nothing more than for the community to come together with some sort of consensus on how their community should develop, how the utilities are gonna be able to be sustained and afforded and all those sorts of things. So from my standpoint, while I reserve judgment on what the proposal is, since there is no proposal, I understand your request, and personally, I look forward to hearing what you come forward with.
I agree entirely.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we'll work with planning and we'll begin to put things forward. We have stakeholders who are there, who they themselves have visions. They've approached us about those. And so we look forward to those discussions, and then we'll include the further community after that. And thank you so much for your time, as always.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you. Very good. We're now officially 4 minutes early. Ms. Mason, attempt number 2 at bringing you up.
Good morning. It is CDBG season. So I'm here today to present to you the list of applications that have come in from communities requesting financial assistance for various projects in their communities. Before I present to you the list, I wanted to make a note that we don't yet know the amount that U.S. Department of HUD is going to give us this year. As of yesterday, they haven't made those announcements yet, but we always like to be prepared so that when they do make the announcements, we can get rolling on these projects. I did receive, however, from the U.S. Department of HUD a budget overview, and it looks like the amount might be less this year. Last year we received a good amount, almost $800,000. So this year I am going to base this preliminary review on $680,000. It's kind of a guess until we know what we'll be receiving. Before I read to you the list, I just wanted to point out just a couple of things. These projects qualify because they serve low to moderate income neighborhoods. And we receive that information based on census data. And sometimes the census data does not accurately reflect the actual neighborhood that is benefiting. So sometimes a community will have to do a survey to qualify that project. And I just wanted to point out that the Village of Harveysburg did go through that hard work of doing the survey, going door to door to get income information from the residents on this project. Another thing I wanted to note is that the Village of Morrow, they have a project from 2021 that is not complete. You usually ask me that question, so I wanted to let you know that that is a situation with Morrow. However, it is under contract and it is underway. So for this list, usually what we start off with is the public service projects because there's a cap on how much we can spend on public service. So one way to look at this is first decide how much you want to spend on public service, and then the remainder could go towards construction projects.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
So we don't know how much we're receiving yet from the federal government on this? We don't know the amount?
Correct. We don't know the amount.
So would it be more appropriate to do this once we know that?
Well, we could wait. However, we still have to do a public hearing once we make the decisions. And with Ohio, the window for construction projects closes in the winter. So typically we make preliminary decisions so that we can get moving on them this summer. What the board has done in the past with the construction projects is select the projects that they want, and sometimes there's one project that we don't know how much we're going to apply to.
Oh, so now on the sheet that you've got up there and that I'm looking at,
Yes.
is it, you've given an estimated amount from from the federal government, from HUD, of $680,000. What is that estimate based on?
Based on the history, last year we received about 800,000, and so I went less this year, knowing that the budget
Okay,
is
so you're being
less.
conservative this year, but
Yes.
is it likely to go down this year?
I think so.
Okay, well, okay, that's fair. And then you've got what you call administrative costs, and what's the administrative cost?
That goes towards salaries and office,
Is that our salaries in
Yes.
office?
parts of our office salaries.
Wouldn't we be spending that anyway?
Well, we spend it from this fund of money. We don't use general fund money.
Okay. I'm just saying that if we're doing it from the office and for salaries, those are office supplies or salaries that we spend regardless of this. That was my question.
We've
I
done it every
understand.
year this way. It's an allocation.
I get it.
When it takes their time
I
away
get
from
it.
their other job.
I get it. I get it. My only point is that we spend it regardless of whether we even did this. All right, so then we've got, but if we assume we've got $605,000 to spend, which is a guess based upon what they've got, then you've got the request, and so I just want to make sure that I understand their request. Is the current request from Family Promise of Warren County and Safe on Main, that's an actual request for this year, correct?
Yes, they are requesting 75,000.
Yeah, I know, I see that,
Yes.
and I just want to understand the chart. So, and that's the same with Safe on Main, so their request are those two amounts. And I know you've come in and you've also shown us what we gave in the past. Okay, it's on the other side there on that, in the white area. Now, down to construction projects, these are the current requests, correct?
Correct.
For each construction project, and the reason why you've separated them from yellow to that kind of bluish color, or light blue, is because the bottom ones are construction projects, while the other ones are service projects.
Correct.
Okay, and I know that we've seen of some of these projects before.
On the construction
Yes,
projects?
right.
Yes, for example, Franklin Township submitted this exact same application last year, but it was not funded, so they're resubmitting it this year.
Okay, because we didn't give them anything in 2023, right?
That's right.
Okay, and the same is true of Harveysburg?
This is, yes, you're correct. I think that they did submit this last year.
Right, and we didn't give them anything.
Correct. They did not receive anything last
Okay,
year.
and is the same true of Morrow?
This is a new one for Morrow.
Okay, and it's just bridge lighting, right?
Yes, they submitted an application last year for a different project.
Different project. And then we've got the South Lebanon, and is this project part of what we gave them last year?
No, this is a new project.
Totally new?
Yes.
Okay, and the total that is requested is how much?
It was just, all of these.
You wanna talk-
was
If you
just
add them
over a
all up,
million.
what's the total
It was
request?
About $1 million.
1.01 million, or somewhere
Okay,
around there.
so they're requesting more money than we're ever gonna have?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So, we received 2 applications for public service projects, Family Promise and Safe on Main, and the board has traditionally granted those awards. And there's a cap on how much we can spend on that. With the construction projects, the Village of Butlerville is requesting money. They've received small grants the last 2 years, and this is their final phase of their road paving projects. The City of Franklin would like to do a storm sewer project for almost $200,000. They're also providing about $100,000 of local funds for that project. Franklin Township would like to repave Morningstar Road. Harveysburg would like to pave several roads in their downtown area. The Village of Morrow would like to have a lighting project over the bridge right there in the downtown area to illuminate that area and the walking and bike path. And the City of South Lebanon has a road project in their downtown area.
And so when are you hoping that the board would make a decision on this in the preliminary project?
If you want to make decisions today, that's fine, but we are okay time-wise, since we haven't received our allocation yet. So I will have to come back to you again, because we'll have a public
Right.
hearing.
See,
But-
I'd rather not do anything until we know exactly what the federal government's giving us.
Okay, so that's fine.
Do you think that it's helpful for us to tell you which ones of these we're interested in today?
Yeah, in the past, that's what we've done. We've made selections, and then we've had one project that we don't know if we can fully fund or not.
Okay, so is there a project under construction that we've started but haven't completed? Because I would like to help somebody complete something that we've helped them to start.
These are all new projects.
Suzanne, have we had these for a while? Did we have this list for a while?
I received them in January, and then we had to make sure they all qualified, and then I waited for the next available work session.
Yeah,
So-
I mean.
Right, but have we had the list for a while? Yeah, then, yeah, I'd rather review this for a little bit. We
Sure.
never make the decision in the first meeting of this is what we're going for. So let's, yeah, we've got to have another public hearing, but we'll review it, come up with our own independent, the three of us will create a list of what's our priority, then we'll come and try to reconcile that once we have at that public hearing when we have a firmer number.
I agree entirely with that, but I would like the answer to the question, which is, have we started any construction project in a previous year that we've helped to fund, or that was started by them that we denied helping to fund? I'd like to know the answer to that question. You don't have to answer it right now if you don't know.
Butlerville for sure.
Yep.
If you consider that a continuation.
I consider that to be, I think it's relevant to my decision-making as to whether they've asked for it before and whether we've granted some money for it before.
So all of these are brand-new, fresh projects. However, the Village of Butlerville, even though it's considered a fresh project, it is a continuation of their plan. Franklin Township's Morningstar Road, they did submit this application last year, and they're submitting it again this year. The rest are new projects.
So Franklin Morningstar was a previous request?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Very good.
And Suzanne?
Yes.
Just for clarification's sake, on things like your salary isn't paid for out of the general fund, so this particular grant, our transit grants and others, those administrative funds come together to fund the grants coordinator position, correct?
That's correct. Our entire office, actually, between solid waste and all of the other
Right.
grants, we're funded through that. We receive no funds right now from the general fund.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Suzanne.
Very good. Staying ahead of schedule, we'll move on to Matt Latham, our CEO of the Park District, for an update.
Commissioners, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here with you today and deliver this update about the Park District. I'm really looking forward to showing you a little bit about what we're up to and what our plans are going forward.
Matt, remind us, you've been on board with the Park District for how long?
For 9 months. We're since the end of May, so I'm hoping my math is correct on that.
So you're getting close to being able to say you're not the new guy any longer.
Yeah, it's kind of a scary feeling, actually. But anyway, again, thank you very much for the opportunity. Just a little bit about me, since I'm relatively new to you all. I've been a landscape architect for 24 years. I've been in the parks and recreation industry for about 11 years, and that's always been my first love. I kind of stumbled upon landscape architecture as an intermediate pathway to get into parks and recreation, originally as a designer and as a planner, but now as a leader. And a little bit about my background. My most recent employment previous to this was with Metro Parks of Butler County, our neighbors next door. I've spent 7 years there as the director of planning and various things before that. So anyway, we're just delighted to be here to update you about the Park District. You know, also in terms of background and trying to help you understand why I'm personally in this industry and trying to improve outdoor recreation options for our residents. This here is my son, Andy. He's 16 now, but this picture, he was 14 years old.
And I know that's not in Warren County. So
Yeah, certainly not, but we do things here around home to prepare for things like this. So for his 14th year, he wanted to climb his first 14er in Colorado. So, you know, we had to make plans, we had to set a goal, then we had to start, we had to persevere and work through adversity to get to the top of this mountain and then to reach the goal. And this really, to me, just illustrates where my passion comes from, which is getting kids outside, getting them off of their devices, out into nature, so that they can learn to love, appreciate, and steward the natural world. And it all goes back to this. This is little mini me back in the 80s, getting ready for a camping trip with my grandparents out to nearby Cowan Lake State Park. That's where my story in Parks and Recreation starts, is those experiences in that campground, riding my little bike around, going around with my Fisher-Price field guide and toy binoculars, scouting out the wildlife, things like that. And 93% of US adults say they have fond memories from childhood about their experiences outdoors and in parks and recreation. And so a little bit about Warren County Park District. So we manage 1,721 acres across the county. We have 19 properties. 13 of those are parks that are currently open to the public. 6 of those are undeveloped conservation areas or future parks. And our top 2 most popular parks are, of course, Armco Park on 741 northwest of Lebanon, and Landon Deerfield Park on Route 22 and 3 in Landon. And what we offer to the community, primarily the great outdoors. Again, just opportunities to get outside, to get off devices, to get into nature, to relax, to unplug, to de-stress, to get out of the whirlwind of social media. Also, education, so that we can learn about the natural world, so that we can develop a connection to the natural world, study it, learn it, and fall in love with nature and become stewards of nature. Physical activity, trails, walking, jogging, biking. Several of our parks are located at or near the Little Miami Scenic Trail, for example, and are great jumping off points for longer excursions, and much more. So our park district is governed by a 3-member board of park commissioners. Ben and Wendy are in the audience today. If you care to wave, let them know you're here. They are appointed by the county probate judge.
As is Jeff.
Oh, Jeff's here. Very good, very good. Oh, thank you very much. Anyway, they're appointed by the county probate judge, and we are a political subdivision of the state of Ohio. And our funding sources are, about half of our funding comes from you all, the county commissioners, which we are very grateful for. And then about 40% or so, 43% is the money that we make ourselves at Armco Park, which is directly reinvested into that park. And then we have about 6% of grants and donations and some other miscellaneous funding sources. So a little bit about park districts. A lot of times there's a lot of confusion about park districts because there are many different types of park agencies that serve our residents. Cities have them, townships have them. What makes park districts special? So these are some examples of park districts in our neighboring counties that you might be familiar with. Now, we don't necessarily want to be exactly like these neighboring organizations, but this is just to give you an idea of what a park district does. And and how many of you here have driven to a neighboring county to go to some of these other parks? Okay. And so, basically our mission is rooted in the enabling legislation for for park districts that's in the Ohio Revised Code. Mr. Grossman, you had mentioned earlier that counties are limited by law in terms of what they can do. All the powers granted to the counties are granted by the legislature. and a park district is no different than that. You know, we are, in the law, we are acquiring lands for forest reserves, conservation of natural resources, and creation of parks, parkways, forest reservations, and the like.
Well,
And-
what is our function? So I see the explanation is that the park, this park area was created, by, you said previously, that it was formed in 1970. The park commissioners, you've given us the current membership, which we know, but the appointing authority is the probate judge of Warren County, which is Joseph Kirby, who also happens to be our juvenile court judge. And that is created by the legislature. They created that particular judgeship. They also then created I'm assuming, the legislature created this park district and gave the right to appoint the members, the commissioners of the park to the probate court. And then the funding sources are, I take it, our only real responsibility is that we provide funding, is that right?
Yes, and it's a very important responsibility.
Oh, I
And-
agree with that.
And honestly, it's completely optional for the county commissioners to do this. You know, that's why we're very grateful.
Is that part of our general fund budget?
No.
It's dollars that come in through the local government fund, and there was a commitment about 5 or 6 years ago to give resources to that, to provide the park district some stability in their planning. And so, over the last 4 years, it's been about $4.8 million that has gone to the park district.
But so I just want to make sure that you put the graphic up, and so the audience understands, we allocate a certain amount of money to the park district. That's your 49%.
Yes.
But in addition, we also own and operate the Armco Park.
The park district does.
Well, the park district does, but we actually, was it granted to us by Armco, or was it granted to the park district by Armco?
It wasn't granted. I negotiated the sale. It was.
We bought it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And
Well,
this-
well,
and this-
it was not, it wasn't we. We is defined as the park board. Commissioners funded it.
Okay, so the commissioners funded the park board's purchase of Armco Park.
Yes. that's
And
correct.
it was supported by a state capital appropriation of.
We got the two
$1
people
million.
here that were involved in
Which,
this, okay?
then State Senator Jones, we couldn't have done it without her.
That's not what I was angling
And,
for.
and Jonathan Sams in Turtle Creek
Yes.
was, so there was basically 3 partners, and I forget exactly who did
And,
what.
and Otterbein also
Yes.
contributed.
Okay, and then so I just want to make sure that we all understand how this is working. And then we have, like we say, the people that are on the park board were appointed by, and we don't have anything to do with that. We don't mind who they are. We like all of these people. And, so Wendy is, was a former city council member in Lebanon. And Jeff was married to a former prosecutor and judge. And Ben's a lawyer, so he doesn't count. Any event, but he's been very active.
He's a
in
hired gun.
Well, he represents some jurisdictions I think he represents Hamilton Township.
Right.
Okay.
Anyway, related to what park districts do, park districts tend to focus on these 3 key areas: natural resource conservation, outdoor recreation, and nature education. And why is that important? Well, these are just some of the reasons why parks in general and park districts specifically are very important to the residents of this county in terms of promoting their health, economy, attracting and retaining businesses and residents, environmental stewardship, social connections, and the like. Just a few quick hit statistics related to health and the economy that I'd like to share with you. You know, it's been shown by scientific studies that spending time in nature actually reduces ADHD symptoms in children and reduces stress in children. And so when we think about how prevalent medication is today, when was the last time a doctor prescribed time in nature as a remedy for health problems? Also, when we think about lower depression rates in adults, people who get outside tend to be less depressed. And we know that suicide is a leading killer among young adults in this country. Also, in terms of health and economics intersecting, there's a study from Lincoln, Nebraska that said there's savings of $3 in healthcare costs for every dollar that's invested in trail infrastructure. Also, proximity to a park has a positive impact on property values. And it's also a highly favored amenity. 75% want hiking and biking trails close to their home. 84% look for high-quality parks when they want to choose where to live. And quality of life ranks second among factors that companies consider when choosing where to locate their businesses. But really what I wanted to talk to you a lot about today was our projects and initiatives. What are we doing? What are we out there trying to accomplish in the community? And so that begins with this body here, who graciously allocated some of the American Rescue Plan Act funding to help fund a couple of key projects within the Park District. This first one here is the installation of synthetic turf at the Armco Park softball complex. And the anticipation of this synthetic turf infield surfacing has greatly increased the demand already for our softball complex, where we're completely booked for tournament weekends all through the spring and fall of 2024. Also, I would like to personally invite you to be the first to know we have a ribbon cutting scheduled for April 26th at 3 p.m. We would be delighted if you could come and see this completed project and be able to cut the ribbon on that. Also, another project that's being enabled by ARPA funds, this is called the Simpson Creek Headwaters Restoration Project at Landon Deerfield Park. Now, this is a little bit of a twist on the original intent of the funds, which was we have a 3-acre lake at Landon Deerfield Park. It's held back by a dam that's regulated by ODNR. And the original intent of the grant funds was to dredge the lake and fix some aspects of the dam that needed fixing. However, after thinking about that, and considering that $500,000 investment in that park, it seems that just to get what we have currently and not create a visible improvement for the public would not necessarily be the best use of that $500,000. So, trying to come up with some creative solutions, we looked to the H2 Ohio program to see if we could pull additional funding into this project and create something transformative for that park. So we came up with the idea of restoring the historic stream channel through that park where that lake was, reducing the size of that lake to a pond so that we can retain that fishing opportunity, but also we create a restored stream channel and create nature play opportunities. Places for people to get down into the creek, interact with the water, interpretive signage to learn about the ecology of streams, wetlands and native vegetation that will be both attractive and will provide pollution removal from waters that are going into our streams and ultimately to the Little Miami River. So this project here, we have the $500,000 in the ARPA funds, graciously granted by the county commissioners. We have the H2 Ohio funds now committed from ODNR. And so this project we envision will include stream and wetland restoration, trails and overlooks for the public to use, interactive water play and creeking and education opportunities, and also mitigating a long-term maintenance liability for us in terms of not having to dredge the lake at great expense on a 10-year ongoing basis and not having to worry about the dam and the ODNR oversight of that dam, because we're no longer holding back a lot of water that could damage downstream structures if the dam fails. we're going to take that hazard out as part of that project. Also, some smaller things, we're working on a new website. We want to forge a very distinct identity for the Park District. We want to make it user-friendly so that people can learn what we have to offer. We are also working on our online reservation system, continuing to upgrade and improve that. We're renovating shelters. We completed 2 at Armco Park last year, and we're slated to do 5 throughout the Park District this year. We also have recently partnered with the Warren County Foundation to launch a Warren County Park District Charitable Fund. That was seeded by a $50,000 donation from the Oder family towards a restroom at Morrow Veterans Park. So the charitable fund is holding on to that money until we do all the planning and design necessary to implement that project. And then we hope to be able to have more philanthropic activity to add to that fund in the meantime so that we can keep it ongoing to support initiatives in the Park District. We have the H2 Ohio grant that I mentioned earlier. We also have, in 2023, seen a 15% year-over-year increase in revenue at our golf course, at our boat dock and softball complex. And those venues cover 92% of the operational costs for that particular park. We've reached 2,000 residents personally through our nature education programs and about 700,000 park visitor occasions overall. We are also working internally to pursue operational excellence. This is a continuing work in progress. You have the new CEO, we have staff reorganization, policies, budget tracking, performance management, et cetera, that we are working on. But the biggest thing that I want to talk to you about today is our upcoming strategic planning process. This strategic plan is really all about focusing our efforts, realizing that we cannot necessarily be all things to all people. And therefore, we need to take some time and reflect and try to understand what is our mission, our vision, our goals and objectives, to be able to come to the community with an actual plan for what we want to accomplish. And that starts by understanding community needs and trends. It starts by getting out into the community and trying to understand what our residents are looking for from their park district. And we also, a key goal, I think the number one goal of this strategic plan is to define the park district's unique value proposition. What separates our organization from other providers, other municipal parks, township parks? What do we do that's different from them? What do we provide that they don't necessarily provide? We shouldn't necessarily be duplicating the services that are coming from cities and townships. There's, if we're simply duplicating what they do, there's not necessarily a reason for us to be here. We need to understand what is our unique contribution to this county. Now, as part of that understanding process, we are engaging in some research, trying to compare ourselves against other park districts that are similarly situated throughout the state. So we've got some preliminary benchmarking data that I want to show to you, and it's really based on what are the counties in Ohio that are closest to us in population, and what are their park districts doing, and how are they funded, and what does that look like? So in terms of how do we compare, one of those metrics that I wanted to share with you was how many acres of park district land are we preserving per 1,000 residents? So these figures are adjusted by population. So right now, Warren County Park District, we're preserving 7 acres per 1,000 residents in this county. And that puts us last among these peer park districts that are closest to us in population.
Do those other districts have a park levy?
Well, this graph might explain that question. These are the funding levels of the various park districts. And so you can see here how we compare to these other park districts, and then the blue that's on these other bars is property tax revenue.
Right,
So that is 100% of your difference, that the voters of those jurisdictions have emphasized parks to the point of having more money, not just to acquire, because we've had the opportunity to acquire more land, but we didn't have the funds to maintain it or upkeep or things like that. And you would also agree that when you are a rural community, the concept of community parks is less important than in an urban setting, correct?
Yes, I would say that's accurate.
So
And-
we've been transitioning from a rural community to a more urbanized, we were just considered an urbanized community in the last 20 years.
Yes, very true, and many of these counties are in similar situations to ours. I would point out, Butler County, although they're a little bit more urban because of having the historic cities of Middletown, Hamilton in them, but they're also an urbanizing county. Delaware County is located immediately north of Columbus, very much a similar situation to Warren County. So a lot of these counties are similarly situated suburban counties. I think the one that sticks out as maybe an outlier is Mahoning, which is Youngstown, so that's more of an urban locale, but the rest of these are suburban counties similarly situated to ours. And then in terms of how does that break down, because one argument could be, well, yeah, your funding is lower because you have less acres to manage. We saw that first graphic, these other park districts have more acres. Well, we have less acres, so, doesn't that make it more comparable? And it does. I do want to point out, though, so this is how our budget divided by the number of acres that we manage looks. And the middle three bars are all Warren County Park Districts, and I wanted to point this out is that we have a lot going to Armco Park because that's where we make the revenue, and we are required, because it's in a special revenue fund, we're required to put that money back into Armco Park. So there's a disparity there, even though overall average, the one on the right here, this puts us slightly ahead of Stark Parks for the overall average. But if we take out Armco, then we're very low.
But again, it's apples and oranges. There's no park levy. So I almost fundamentally disagree with your analysis that we're underfunding. We're not. We're overfunding as a percentage of taxpayer dollars that are directly on a discretionary basis going into this. Then if you're starting to go down the path of, well, we need a levy, that's already been polled and looked at several years ago. There was a big study done on that particular subject, and there was really no appetite for it.
Well, I think that a levy is not necessarily our go-to solution. We're embarking on a strategic planning process, and I think part of that process needs to be exploring all of the different options that are available for funding a park district. Just because other park districts are funded by levies, yes, that's an option, but that doesn't necessarily require us to go down that route. I think it would be worthwhile to work with you all and work with others in the county to explore alternatives to how we might fund the park district.
One of the things that I think that as a general proposition that we should recognize is that while we're still a very rural county, we have a wonderful state park in Caesars Creek State Park here that is just compares to no other. It's a wonderful, and that's a state park in Warren County. Next, we have a wonderful amenity in the Little Miami River, which has bike trail and has canoeing and all sorts of opportunities there that is not our park system, but is a tremendous amenity. Next, we have some communities like Mason and Lebanon and Springboro, and I'm particularly familiar with Mason, but Deerfield too, have wonderful parks, and a lot of them, for both organized sports activity and just park facilities. And we recently were involved with the McKeno Park because we gave part of the property for it, which is probably one of the most unique parks in the country for individuals that have some sort of disability and making them accessible. And that park not only has become a wonderful amenity to children with disabilities and adults with disabilities, but to the entire community that loves the park. So there's just, to me, and I know you're not making this comparison, and you're only talking about our park system and what we fund, and I get that. But the fact is that this community has some wonderful park assets that bar none are just super, no, we don't have the Rocky Mountains, okay? I love the Rocky Mountains. I go out to Colorado lots. But, and I used to do it when I was, because I love to ski, but any of that, I get Commissioner Young's point too, which is we don't have, we've prided ourselves in keeping our taxes very low, but at the same time, we have wonderful amenities because we have wonderful partners in the state.
And to coincide on that we just built a $50 million sports complex a few years ago. And on top of that, we just saved the one global sports asset in the entire state, which is the Western Southerns, which also is now going to be an unbelievable outside facility for things like pickleball. So we're all about it, but we're doing it in the confines of trying to be fiscally responsible.
Yeah.
And so when I see a lot of the charts, that's where, I don't want to sound aggressive, but it is apples and oranges because there's not a park levy. So on a percentage of what, on a discretionary basis, this county is investing in sports and parks, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, and I would just point out a little bit, you know, when I say other counties are similarly situated, 4 of the 6 counties on this list also have state parks within their boundaries. You know, and yes, we do need all of the players at the table. We need to have partnerships. 100%.
Well, I was wondering where you're going with the presentation. Do you want us as a board to advocate, change, do something differently than what we're doing now? Because yes, we can provide funding. That's apparently our only real deal here. Because we don't pick the board members, we don't control how you function, we don't control where you allocate your spending. We can provide some things. I take it, does your board have the ability on your own to place something on a park levy, or is that something that we have to do?
I would have to research that.
Well, I bet you that our law director knows the answer to that
So
question.
you've mentioned you're entering into a strategic planning process,
Yes.
and I assume that that's why you're here today.
Yes, it
Is to ask us or invite us to participate in your strategic planning
Yes,
process.
it
So
is.
can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me move a little forward in the presentation. So what we're doing as part of our strategic plan process is that we are assembling a group. First of all, we want to have a steering committee of key community stakeholders. We're targeting about 20 people or so to guide this process for us, to play a key role in shepherding us through the process of community engagement as we develop this strategic plan. And yes, to your point, Commissioner Jones, this presentation is about presenting factual information about the park district. There is no ask attached to this presentation today because we haven't yet gone through a process of understanding who we are and what we want to provide and being able to present that to the community. And so an ask at this point for funding, say, for example, would be premature at this point without going through this process. So anyway, we're assembling this steering committee to guide the process. We're going to have various types of surveys, both the online surveys and statistically valid surveys, to get a sense of what the community needs are, what the community desires are. And then we're also going to be hosting open houses around the county to invite people in and let them tell us what they're looking for from their park district. And I would like to, if one of the 3 of you would be willing, I would like you to invite you to be a key participant in that steering committee if you would be willing and available. We're going to meet about 4 times this year to, again, do SWOT analysis and do exercises about understanding our mission and so on, so that we can arrive at what is the focus of the park district. So that's my primary ask of you all today, is for your engagement in this process, either individually as a part of the steering committee or through another work session that we can schedule where we can go into more depth and really get some input from you all about this strategic plan.
And so the process will take place between now and the end of the calendar year?
Yes.
And so your hope is that through all of your statistical, you know, survey work, your qualitative engagement work, that by the first of next year, there is some community-wide plan around the park district.
Yes, and I hope to be able to come before you around this time next year and present those results. And we have several folks in the room who have come out and want to show their support for the park district. If you wouldn't mind standing up if you're here supporting the park district today. Thank you very much. And anyway, I don't know if you're at all interested in having folks thank you for your support of the park district, but please let me be the first to thank you for your support. Obviously, it means a lot to us. Our organization would not be where it is today without your support.
Can I go back to the question that I asked? And Shannon had a great redirect there, so I appreciate that entirely.
I wasn't trying to redirect, I just was trying to get to
I
what
agree
his
with that.
question was.
Absolutely, it's fine, because that is what he was about here, but the lifeblood of doing anything is money. And since we have something to do with that, and since one of the primary ways in which additional funds are raised is through a levy on property taxes, real estate taxes. So my question is, do you want that to happen? Is that one of your things that you're gonna be surveying or looking into? And who has the ability to place that? Because I assume to get the levy, it has to be placed on a ballot and has to be approved by the voters. And you'd have to decide the millage, because you're gonna have to decide the amount of money you wanna raise. And it's once you've got money, and maybe the survey is like a wish list, and then you're gonna have an analysis of the cost, and you're gonna say, how do we get that money? But the primary way in which this is raised is typically through a real estate tax levy.
Can I help answer that one?
Ready to answer the question.
Yeah, I can answer that bluntly, I think, from the authority that is the park board and the board president. We do not want a park levy. That is the path of last resort. Do I think that's inevitable bluntly sometime in my lifetime? Yes. Do we want to do that anytime soon? Cataclysmically, absolutely
Is
not.
that something?
We wanna avoid
Your
that.
board decides that you can put it on the ballot?
I believe so, and I'm not wearing my law hat here, but I do know of an instance where Hamilton County's park board attempted to go, which is identically a freestanding political subdivision separate from the county.
I have mine on. Yes, you do.
We have to go to the county for it?
No, you have
You have
the
the
authority.
authority.
by
Exactly,
resolution.
but here's what I wanna say to
But there's a
that.
cap on it, contrary to what Mr. Grossman alluded to. There's a cap on what that may be.
Well,
Yeah.
I didn't mention cap.
Here's the reality from our perspective and why I wanted to answer that question, and it's the same example as Hamilton County's as well, is Hamilton County went for park levy over the objection of the county commissioners, temporarily until understandably and rightfully so, politics and the community got the better of them, and they realized the error of their ways. Bluntly speaking, we will never go for a park levy without the county commissioners, I don't even have to say
Did they-
support,
did their-
but
did their-
acquiescence to us being on the ballot.
Yeah, was there a
But that's
levy?
something we don't want anytime
Yeah,
soon.
did they lose their levy?
They withdrew it once they realized the error of their ways.
But they lost, the public didn't pay
Correct.
for it.
So I think the short answer is, I think legally we can, politically we won't.
Ben, you know where I stand on this stuff. I don't think there's been a bigger fan of the park districts.
Absolutely.
And literally, that's the first time for you young people, that's the first time a Fortune 100 company's chief financial officer actually yelled at me. There's been a few other circumstances since then, but over the purchase of Armco Park, the CFO of Armco Park and I got in a fairly heated conversation about negotiating that deal. But, you know, also that I don't like doing things just for the sake of doing them, and you always know
Same.
where I stand. I'm just saying, with the financial position of the county right now, if we're talking about anytime soon, a substantial increase of general fund dollars going to the park board, I don't see that happening right now, simply because of the other things that we have going on.
Yeah.
Which are 100% tied to recreation, outdoor, and our number one industry, which is tourism. And so we have tried to make those strategic investments in things that will continue to bring outsiders in. Parks are great, and you do have some, I'm not an expert on this, but I would say you would have some people visit from outside communities to come stay at your parks and camp and things like that, but they're not a driver of outside tourism to just come to a local park unless it's sports related, where, you know, Johnny's got a game this weekend or whatever, and you're staying in the hotels, eating in the restaurants and all those types of things, which has been a financial success for this county. And it's one of the most important things that we do. So I'm just trying to say, I've been around the block enough to know strategic plans, consultants, blah, blah, blah. I know what that means. Eventually it's money. And, oh, well, we've got this great plan. You all participated in it. Now you got to triple your budget to us. I'm just saying, from my perspective, that's kind of a non-starter anytime soon, just to be blunt with you.
Yeah, to likewise be equally blunt with you as well, I think that you were misremembering the results of the survey that was done before. It didn't state that Warren County's residents weren't interested in paying more in property taxes in order to get better parks. It said they wouldn't support a levy because they didn't know we even had a county park district. So it's not that your or my electors aren't interested in potentially paying more, it's they've not known who we are. And also a further lesson just for everyone here of how we all got in this conundrum. Originally, Park District, when it was created, it was somewhat self-sufficient in that it was local government funds that just paid for it. But a few administrations ago at the governor's level, that changed, and the county stepped in when the Park District would otherwise have no funds. So we've kind of been going along the way that we have, all out of the benevolence of the county, that's for sure. But I don't want to say that it just presupposes, by the fact that you want to invest in tourism, in those other things, that there aren't needs of our electors for that.
Sure,
I think
and
that's what the
didn't we
survey was
do a
looking to
big strategic plan, I don't know, 8 or
Nope.
10 years ago? I thought there was.
We didn't do is, what we used to do is every 5 years, we would update our kind of, we would call it a comprehensive plan.
Yeah,
or
the
a
comprehensive plan,
strategic-
where it was the capital budget, and you would say, we need bathrooms here, whatever. I remember getting those.
We just basically, it was nothing more honestly and bluntly than a regurgitation of our current status without any strategic thinking towards the future. That was all it was. It would list what we had, what we do, hey, we need new bathrooms. But it didn't think strategically towards the future. And I think, I mean, and bluntly, and to push back at you now and later, I do think that we are going to want, and I think our residents will want, an increase in that, in our funding, whether it's from you all or hopefully from others as well locally, because it improves the quality of life, it improves the return on investments of housing. It's not just all about tourism. And we also do have, at the county level, like, you might not have caught it, but earlier, the concept of what is a county park district? What parks should we be involved with? Armco Park gets a heck of a lot of outside visitors, of which I'm sure we can provide the data on, outside the county coming in and spending. money this year.
100%, and if you remember,
Yeah.
there was, and I know Jeff remembers this, that was not a layup. That and Bruce, I don't think all 3 commissioners were unanimous in even purchasing Armco Park, if I remember correctly.
At first, anyway.
Yeah, that it was.
Agreed.
It was a reach for us.
Yeah.
To go do that, and we did do it, and
Yeah.
it has worked.
Agreed.
So, you know, again, just put a ribbon on this, if you guys want to do a strategic plan, you're a separate duly elected board, that is fine. I'm just trying to be straightforward of,
No,
in the
absolutely
short
do.
term, I don't know that I personally want it, but I'm only one of 3.
Absolutely.
Want to go talk about a substantial increase to what we're providing. So I just want everybody to have their eyes wide open.
Yeah, eyes wide open, I completely understand your opinions on that, and eyes wide open, I will be spending the next while trying to convince you otherwise, because I think there is some value in increasing the park district's budget that all of our electors want. The prior study doesn't show that they don't support county parks. It's more, they didn't know who we are.
Well, your point is well taken about, people don't decide to move here because there's tourism here. It is a way for us to generate economic activity, to support the broader community, certainly, and we have given extraordinary amounts of money to outside interests to
Absolutely.
invest here. So, I hear what you're saying is that, there's benefit in doing you all have determined, there's benefit in doing a strategic plan to understand what your needs are now and into the future. Part of that is gonna be how you finance it. There's a lot of ways to do that. And that having a broad, steering committee and active engagement with everybody that participates in this, the municipalities, the townships, certainly the county, but also, other entities that have interest in it, soil and water conservation and what have you, seems to me to be prudent. I'd be happy to participate as an individual to the extent that that's helpful. I can be for you or against you,
I don't
whichever
know
helps
whether
you
to ask for
more.
you or Commissioner Young to be on it, because I'd throw the gauntlet of raise your voice as part of it.
She would be much better.
Well, I just I don't have an opinion
Yeah.
about,
I just don't want us
I
to
don't
cook the sauce. I
understand-
want it to be genuine, so that when we come back, it's the yays and the nays, in favor or against.
yeah,
whatever it
like,
might be.
if I'm not genuine, then okay, I don't need to participate, but
You will be.
all I'm saying is I don't understand what your needs are.
Yep.
I don't know what the long-term costs are, so I'm not advocating for a position. I'm simply telling you, I'm willing to learn more about
Yeah.
it. So if that's helpful to you, I'm happy to
It'll be
participate.
extraordinarily
If
helpful.
you would rather have Commissioner Young, that's quite
Well,
okay too.
I would like you all to feel valued and involved as part of the process.
I'm just
Um,
willing to learn about what the needs are of the community and where the community voice is heard. And
We
so,
appreciate that greatly.
and I think that our parks are an important piece of our overall kind of health and well-being of a community. And I think that while every public park can't be a revenue generator like Armco Park is, which has been a great boon, and it's a great example of when lots of partners come to the table under a common purpose to be able to solve a challenge. I believe that if done correctly, your strategic plan might be that same way. The other thing that I would just mention is, one of the reasons why I have advocated for a very long time the increasing the local government funds to county governments, but certainly other governments benefit from that, because we spend a lot of tax dollars. We send a lot of tax dollars to the state, and we require local governments to do lots of things, of which in county government, we don't get to pick and choose. And I think, the counter, the thing that I would ask of you is, as we continue at the County Commissioners Association to be advocating for more money into the local government funds, that you all use your voice there, because as that percentage goes up, as far as I am concerned, it then has an opportunity to be able to support the parks in a way that doesn't continue to put the burden on our residential property owners. And that's, at the end of the day, that's what our biggest concern is always, is that of all of the type of taxation, it's the one that we find the most onerous and most offensive, and that we're really, careful about. I mean, we those who have taxing authority and have levies, we ask them to partner with us to, not be keeping money that just a cash reserve for the sake of having a cash reserve, and work with us to be able to return some of those monies. So, I'd love to be able to find more resources for the parks over time. I'm not sure that, you know, your point about it being an option of last resort is certainly well taken, and hope it doesn't get there. But
Agreed.
getting our share of those dollars back into our community directly impacts not only our community, but it impacts your bottom line and the rate at which you would come to us as voters to levy ourselves a property tax, which I hope is not
Nor I.
not.
Nor any.
And there is nobody in the county better suited than Commissioner Jones to understand the intricacies of working with the state. So, yeah, I'm gonna call this one to order. I feel the love, thank you, yes. Hopefully, you know, I'm always trying to
Agreed.
shoot straight with you guys. Again, the
I
impression
appreciate that.
is, we are huge supporters of the parks.
We appreciate it.
And I would like to compliment Wendy, yourself, and Jeff on your new hire. I mean, obviously, you're passionate about this subject, and you're a professional in this arena, which I really appreciate. And even though I was a little tough on you today, when we're talking about money stuff, I appreciate you, and I think you're gonna have a great tenure here.
Thank you. And thank you for your time, and thank you for your support.
Very good. Next, Mr. Hagemeyer. Washington Township. How are our friends in Washington Township doing? And you want to talk a little solar?
Yeah, we're doing great, thank you. Scott Hagemeyer, Washington Township Board of Trustees President for this year. So, thank you for sticking us on the agenda here. Really, I'm here today on behalf of the Township Board of Trustees on a fact-finding mission. So I'm presuming the commissioners are aware that Vesper Energy had approached more recently Washington Township with the goal of leasing up to 4,500 acres of property for the purpose of installing a 150 megawatt solar city based on that volume of property. I'm not here on behalf of supporting it or advocating against it. Again, I'm here on just a fact-finding mission. I'm curious to know where the commissioners stand. I appreciate the opportunity that the Regional Planning Commission and the Rural Zoning Commission has met with us a couple times just to try and walk us through some of this process. So, again, because this is a new venture for us, this is information that's completely new, we just have a series of concerns. One of which is, again, the volume of acres that they're talking about. Just to be clear, the presentation Vesper Energy presented to the township involved the interchange at Wilmington Road and Interstate 71. Their goal was to purchase property currently owned by UC on the northwest corner. And the purpose of that is because the AES Ohio grid is able to tie into there. The presentation basically used Wilmington Road headed east as a center line, the north and south side of Wilmington Road going nearly 4.5 miles down the road towards Clinton Massey School, nearly coming up to Hagemeyer Farms. And again, like I said, I'm not advocating for behalf, it's just a fact-finding mission. But again, one of the concerns, and again, this is on behalf of the entire Board of Trustees, we just met recently and I'm representing the board. Vesper's viewpoint was that Washington Township is a great place for them based on having large tracts of agricultural land not currently under consideration for commercial developing. They're right. And actually we agree to some extent. The township's view is that those large tracts of agricultural land are currently used for large volume commercial agricultural purposes. So if you take that out of the picture, there is a large volume of cropland that is no longer producing crops. Another concern of ours is the term of the lease. So the presentation Vesper made to the township was they were looking to lease these properties from individual property owners for 30 years with two mutually agreeable extensions at 5 years apiece. Dale Settlemyer, our newly elected township trustee, is also one of the larger property owners. He was approached by the same company with a 30-year lease with two 10-year extension lease potentials. So we're talking about taking that property out of commercial agricultural value for anywhere between 30 and 50 years.
And that changes the tax valuation too,
It
correct?
does significantly, yeah. So it's my understanding, and Bruce, feel free to chime in everywhere I screw this up. Because, based on the volume, so any solar company in excess of 50 megawatts is considered what's the term? A utility company. And their property values, their taxation is significantly altered. They presented a pretty significant amount of revenue that they were going to generate to all the taxing districts that are currently receiving some property taxes. The commissioners, the board of trustees, the fire district, the schools, everything out there that gets tax money that we all are very protective over. And actually, their presentation suggested that they would generate just over $1 million annually, divided out between the taxing districts that are currently receiving property taxes from that property. And they gave us a whole breakdown of it. So the county would receive 15.47% of that, equaling $162,000 per year. The township would receive $63,000 per year. And again, it's broken down significantly beyond that, even down to the community mental health district, Warren County Health District.
So Scott, what are you asking us?
What's your 2 cents? Where do you stand? What are you thinking? What makes sense? So the county and the township a number of years ago started down the road of an area plan, and for a number of reasons that didn't make sense to progress, so it kind of got put on the shelf.
Is this a facility to generate electricity?
Electricity, yes.
And who is it gonna be providing the electricity to?
AES.
Okay,
AES
and-
Ohio, the power grid.
Okay, and do we have a say as to whether or not this occurs or not?
And that's
Yes,
one of the reasons that we
so-
asked Trustee Hegmeyer to come to here is because Bruce has been doing some research. I think there was some research that was previously done for the township specifically, or a township specifically. But, let me kind of turn it more from a legal side for Bruce, but the county commissioners do have a role relative to not having any say or having say pro or con. And so I think that's where a lot of the research that Bruce was bringing
All right.
forward kind of matched up.
So do we have the ability to say no or yes to this, or do we help make it happen by saying we like it? In other words, what is our role? And did we not do something like this in Turtle Creek Township with the
Yes.
Cincinnati Zoo
But
property?
it was less than 50 megawatts.
Right.
It was like 38 megawatts or something, if I remember.
It's 19.
19
And it was only
megawatts.
for them, it was not for the power
Well, they
grid.
might be selling their
Okay.
excess.
All right, so there's some
Yeah,
predicate for us
so-
doing this. We've got some history of it.
Well, what I'm trying to understand from a legal standpoint is that there was a law change after I left that, because it used to be divided up between projects that were less than 50 megawatts or projects larger than 50 megawatts. Then those projects were, the power siting board had the authority to determine those projects. I'm just learning now from Bruce that there has been a law change that now, I'm not sure how clear it is about what our authority is in the projects that are more than 50 megawatts. And so that's what I'm trying to understand is how we can, what is our ability to allow or disallow projects greater than 50 megawatts, and how that relates to the power siting board.
So it's my understanding, and again, like I said, Bruce, I think we're all looking for your expertise and research on this, but it's my understanding that the Power Siting Board, based on the somewhat recent passage of, is it either House Bill or Senate Bill 52, allows that the president from the Board of County Commissioners is represented on that board now. And also the president or chairperson of the Township Board of Trustees is also a voting member of that particular specific
So it
project.
changes the makeup of the power siting board that's
Sure.
hearing these issues. But is that the only change that
No.
it's making?
No.
Okay.
You are correct that the line of demarcation is 50 megawatts. It still is. If it's below 50 megawatts, it's considered a small solar facility, which we have authority to regulate through our zoning regulations. In comparison to a large solar facility, which the Ohio Power Siting Board has jurisdiction over deciding. In October of 2021, Senate Bill 52 went into effect. It is a piece of legislation that was co-sponsored by our own Senator Wilson, and it was codified in the zoning statutes for counties, so in Title 303. And there's two ways under that legislation that a Board of County Commissioners can be involved in this process, where it is a large solar facility, larger than 50 megawatts, as like a precursor to before the Ohio Power Siting Board may or may not be able to entertain an application. One way is under Section 30358 of the Revised Code, which empowers a Board of County Commissioners to adopt a resolution, not as part of our zoning code as a text amendment or a map amendment, even though this process requires mapping to be done, to designate all or part of the unincorporated area of a county as a restricted area that prohibits the construction of a large solar facility, or a large wind farm, or what the statute calls an economically significant wind farm. And then the statute just collectively refers to them as a utility facility. A large solar facility, again, is an electric generating plant or has associated facilities that's capable of an operation at 50 megawatts or more, okay? We do not have any of those in Warren County, by the way, because I got confirmation of that from the organization that coordinates who gets on the grid. Presently, there's only 2 in Warren County that's on the grid, and they're both 19, and one of them is the solar farm on the Cincinnati Zoo property in Turtle Creek Township. Let me back up and say, in case I forget to later, and that is, we do have some basic zoning regulations for those small solar facilities under our zoning code. We don't have a lot of zoning regulations, and you might hear today from staff inquiring whether you want them to consider working on, bolstering some of those regulations on a small, but staying on topic with what Scott talks about. The statutory process for the county commissioners under 30358, it's really odd because it's different than our zoning code process, and it requires you to conduct either a regular or a special meeting, and you have to publish notice 30 days prior to the meeting. You have to post a map of all the designated areas in the county that you want to designate as restricted areas prohibiting these large solar facilities. Those maps have to be posted in every library throughout the county, which is a very unique thing. And you have to provide written notice to all school districts, municipal corporations, and township trustees located in whole or in part within the boundaries of the district. And should you want to change that resolution at a future date, you got to go back through that same process. The result is, if you do adopt such a resolution, the statutory scheme in Title 303, which is county zoning authority, goes on to talk about what the Ohio Power Siting Board may or may not do. And if you adopt such a resolution, then the Ohio Power Siting Board is prohibited from accepting an application for a certificate for a large solar facility or to amend an existing certificate. I have many concerns about Senate Bill 52, which I've expressed to Senator Wilson. In part, that there's a couple of components of it that I believe are unconstitutional, and some of it just doesn't fit Warren County very well. So obviously Warren County had no seat at the table in discussing this proposed legislation prior to going into effect in 2021. And let me also say this. I've done a little bit of research because you guys typically want to know what other counties do. I can tell you that I've had a lot of conversation with the Ohio Power Siting Board, and they provided me with information that in Ohio there are 31 counties that have a resolution. I'm not saying what that resolution says. I'm just saying there's 31 counties that have a resolution. I was able to obtain copies of 5, I think. I got Butler, Brown, Claremont, Preble, and Highland counties. Resolutions where they did something. Preble, for example, put down a resolution under this one provision, and it excluded one township. I have a problem with excluding an entire township from a constitutional analysis standpoint, but that's what Preble did. Butler, Claremont, those counties basically did the entire county. Except Butler County excluded one of its 13 townships. It left out Lemon Township, and I'm going to speculate it's because the Butler County Commissioners asked each township to adopt their own resolution and submit it to them of support, and I'm going to speculate that Lemon just simply did not do that, but the other townships did. I have a real problem with that because Butler is similar to Warren County because those townships have their own zoning authority. A lot of those townships do. I don't know how many of the 13 do, but we know some of the larger ones like Westchester, Liberty, and so forth, they have their own. And in Warren County, as you know, we have 6 townships that have their own zoning resolution. 3 of those are home rule, 3 of them are not home rule, and then the remaining 5 are under the county's jurisdiction. So in my view, for you to adopt a resolution under Senate Bill 52 for the entire county, you don't have the authority to do that because you don't regulate those townships' land use through zoning. They do that themselves. So I think that's one of the flaws, maybe not one of the largest flaws, but one of the flaws, and yet some of these counties did that.
For the record, do we do Washington's?
We do Washington's, yes, and that's why Scott is here, and it's exactly what I said earlier. It's that directive that went to staff that said, when some township wants something, before staff goes down that road, we want that township to come and seek the input of the county commissioners and get some direction from them. Are we interested in pursuing such a thing?
So there would be a zone change required for this?
No zone change. That's the oddity of this particular provision in 30358. It's a standalone resolution where you do this. And
but they would need enabling legislation from us or the zoning authority to change from, agriculture, no?
No, you are the one that makes this decision, and frankly, it really has nothing to do with zoning. And the biggest concern I have about this legislation from a constitutional standpoint, it has absolutely no standards or criteria in it whatsoever. So county commissioners could engage in capricious, arbitrary,
Yeah,
vague.
which is the whole reason why previously it was the Power Sighting Board to insulate the process, if you will, from that kind of activity. And in the lack of standards, if there's a lack of standards, the, property right valuation issue, I think, becomes really important, because if you're not allowing some sort of commercial activity there, I don't know what, based on what, because we don't like that particular type of thing. It's like, seems to me that that's a takings of some sort that I'm certainly not comfortable with. And so my question to you is gonna be, first, is this something that applies countywide or only in the townships in which we do zoning? And then the second question is, on what basis would we make those determinations? So, for example, just listening to this particular example and where this property is located, and I'm familiar with the UC property, and I've certainly talked about this, in a larger context, but in particular as it relates to the Honda redevelopment north on 71 and those large tracts of land that, whether or not we're able to determine our destiny in, with those large tracts of land, to say this is the kind of development we want along I-71, in the same way that we're dealing with kind of the end of that cycle along I-75. And it's, for 50 years to have that large tract of land along I-71 near an interchange captive to a solar array would not be my first choice, to the extent that I have a choice, right? Like, I don't know what that choice is.
Well, let me answer a couple of your questions, and one is, in our 5 townships, including Washington, we have some authority to do certain things if it's less than 50, if it's a small, so we can engage in planning and zoning to do what you're suggesting. But the problem is with this particular, and there's a second way I'll get to in a minute, which I think will be more of an interest to the board as opposed to this first way. But there are no standards. This legislation, and I expressed that, all these concerns to Senator Wilson, and I said, I think there's a lot better ways to do this, but this legislation is not it. So, moving on to the second one, to try to keep this as brief as possible, and that is, and again, one more time, under that scheme where you have no standards and what do you use, I can't answer that question for you. You have to make this decision like some of the counties have done in this sweeping blanket. Some of the counties that considered doing it, like Delaware, that we're most often compared to, we just heard that this morning, because they're a lot of times the fastest growing county in the state. They contemplated it and they eventually decided not to do it under that scheme. The second, and again, if you did do the resolution, then the Ohio Power Sighting Board has no authority to accept an application. The second scheme, which makes a little more sense than the first scheme, but it has the same problems, there's no standards for you to apply, So, it would be scrutinized, whatever you decided to make those standards, is under the statute, and this is under one of the Ohio Power Siting Board provisions in our zoning, chapter 303, it says before an applicant can apply to the Ohio Power Siting Board for a certificate or an amended certificate, there's a process that they have to follow. And the first part of this, which is really odd, is it says that the applicant has to hold a public meeting.
How do they do that?
I don't know how they do that, Commissioner. That's the same question I have. And when they hold the public meeting, they have to give notice to the Board of County Commissioners and to the Board of Township Trustees, they're gonna hold this public meeting. And which tells you, because they have to give you notice, it's not contemplated in the statute that you're the one that's holding the public meeting. And then the statute goes on to say that 14 days prior to the applicant's public meeting, they have to give notice to the county commissioners of certain things. And those include whether the facility will be a large solar facility.
But Bruce, I don't understand. Can we keep it simple from the standpoint of, I understand you're going down there's this new law that talks about, do we do something for the whole county? And you're saying that's problematic, that if we really do it, but then there's also a question before us right now on something that is inside of the territory that we control zoning on. And you're saying if we said this is great, let's do it, we would have to pass a resolution of support, or what?
You would have to pass a resolution that says, hey, property owners, you can't do that.
You can't, or you can?
Cannot. And Commissioner Jones said something earlier and made me think of something another commissioner has said a long time since I've sat over here, and it's a colloquialism called picking winners and losers. That's you. How do you pick the winners and the losers? The state legislation doesn't tell us that. But let me back up and clarify one thing. The first provision where the commissioners adopt the resolution, it's not just the entire county, it can be just a part of the county. So you could say, okay, we can't do 6 townships, they have their own zoning. We can do R5 if we want to do that. You have one here is Washington and says, and I'm not clear on what Scott is saying. Is Scott saying the whole township or just a part of the township? And I'll give you the heads up, if your position is the whole township, I don't think that's constitutional.
It's not.
I think
Just
that's
to be clear,
categorical exclusionary zoning, and it would be tough to defend that. But if you go through a process where there's some due diligence done and you come up with a map and you want to map out because the Washington Township trustees want you to exclude certain areas, you can do that.
Okay, fair enough. So you're saying you're very shaky on this. You guys are concerned. Commissioner Jones brought up one of the 2 major points that I was personally concerned about. Number one, my impression was that UC land was actually donated to them, and there was some restrictions on it had to be to UC. They've never actually tried to market it. Could they even sell it? I'm not positive of that, but I think I was told that at one point. And that is a great asset for the community on a very long-term basis. 50 years from now, there could be like a UC Claremont, there could be a UC Warren County campus there. That is a big deal. That's what the land is there for. And number 2, the entire 71 corridor outside of that exclusionary area where the Intel plant is going to be built is going to be a hotbed of economic activity for high-tech, good jobs, manufacturing, and you guys are ground zero for that. So to come in and say at this point, let's take hundreds of acres or whatever this is, and let's just go put a passive solar farm on it, I'm against that. I think that this, a few minutes from the highway, so if you're asking for direction, just to, again, trying to put a bow on this, I'm not for that, and if we can go back and whatever we need to do, because I understand there's a bigger systemic issue with the whole county and what do we do and all that, but if we can isolate this one particular question and say, do we support carving out this big chunk, when you guys are very iffy on it to begin with, if you guys were like, hey, this is gonna save the township, we're in trouble, we gotta have this, okay, that would carry a lot of weight with us. But you're not saying that, and
No, and again, yeah, just to be clear, I'm here for on a fact-finding mission, both on behalf of the township and clearly on behalf of the commissioners. So as Bruce mentioned, this is new ground. There's very shaky gray legislation. And again, so I just wanted to open the dialogue. I wanted to
Do
see
you
where.
want this or don't you want it? Because one of the things that, we have the ability in townships that we do the zoning on to do things that we don't have the ability in cities where we don't have anything to do with it, or townships we don't do the zoning. So I don't have a problem with the fact that we can do something in your jurisdiction that the legislature now permits us to do that we can't do someplace else. However, the fact that we don't have criteria that Bruce mentions, I can invent some good criteria. The same criteria I used when I approved the smaller solar panel farm area that the Cincinnati Zoo owned. And it was, and what we did was, I wanted to know, how big is the acreage there? Is it gonna bother somebody? Are they gonna see it? Is it gonna be, and they said, no, it was little and it was a small part, okay. So.
But you can't do that on large solar facilities.
That's why I mean, okay, I get it.
You cannot do it.
I get it. And so now, Bruce, if we do nothing,
No, if you, I'm sorry. Go
okay,
ahead.
so if we do nothing, is the state said to somebody who wants to do it, that they just go hold a public meeting, give us notice, tell us that they're gonna have it at the Golden Lamb, invite somebody to it that we don't know about, maybe we go, maybe we don't have any say. Is that what goes on?
You do have say. I didn't get to that
Oh, okay, but you
part.
didn't get to the say part. What say do we have?
So let me put a ribbon on it for you, and that is, what happens after they have this really odd meeting is, within 90 days after that, the Board of County Commissioners can adopt a resolution at your regular agenda items, and you can prohibit the construction of it. You can limit the boundaries of it to a smaller geographic area within the area that they propose. So instead of being proactive and doing this resolution that I think is maybe unconstitutional or it has its problems, you wait before they can go to the Ohio Power Siting Board. They gotta do this public meeting process, and it comes to you. And then you can then either stop it, which I don't encourage you to do because there's no standards, but you can limit the area like Washington Township trustees are encouraging you to do, and say, we got this prime acreage out there that we don't like this on, and you can come, we're gonna have to invent some criteria because the state legislature didn't give us
I
it.
prefer to react to it, not do anything today.
But I think it's fair to, if that company's coming back, and again, I don't want companies to go spend a bunch of time and money if they're not going to have local support bending over backwards for it. I would, that's why I always like to try to be clear with this particular question of such a big area encompassing potential future university status and that manufacturing hub that is going to come straight down 71, I'm not a fan of that. And so before they go spend a bunch of time and money, I think that's important to know.
Well, my guess is they hate Senate Bill 52 more than Bruce does. I mean, they have to deal with this no matter where they are. I mean, they know that there's this
Well, somebody lobbied
ultimate
for this to
veto.
get this, somebody wanted this. This didn't just get invented by a bunch of senators.
Yeah, it's a huge
Well, again,
issue.
yeah, and I think the point of confusion is that, again, solar is potentially the next technology. It's continuing to develop, and what's going to look like 10 and 20 and 30 years from now. So, again, the township's position is that we're not confident that 30 to 50 years of that property, that 4,500 acres being tied up with no future development options, we're just not confident that makes sense.
But they don't have 4,500 acres. You said there's multiple property owners, correct? Or did I
Yeah,
misunderstand?
no,
And what's wrong with a
yeah,
property
so
owner saying,
they would have to
no,
lease
not
it
interested?
individually from the individual property owners, and the property owners have to agree to it, they can't just
And I
carte blanche say, I'm
understand,
taking this.
I understand your board is unanimous, one of which is Dale Saddlemeyer, that you indicated is a large property owner. And if he's unanimous on it not being a solar array, then when they knock on his door, he can say, not interested.
That's correct.
And then the county commissioners don't have to worry about taking away some individual's property rights. And I would think if UC wants, at this point, to make a decision to move on from the satellite campus business model and generate money for something else, their lawyers are gonna be all over us about, you did this and there's no
Yeah.
standards for you to be applied, you just made them up.
Well, and they may also say, look, our long-term plans for the next 30 years don't envision a new campus, but this is a way for us to generate revenue in the meantime, is that it's a way for them to maintain the property, it's a way for them to get other money in that then allows them to fund their larger educational mission. So if they're talking about contracts that are 30 years, that might fit into their long-term plans, not inconsistent with their future growth. And so how do you say, well, no, you're forced to be relegated to a CAUV valuation versus a public utility valuation, which is much greater for them. So, I think that there is, I'm certainly no lawyer, but it seems to me that is a takings issue in determining what they can do with their property that.
Well, just to put a final on this, so you've heard the opinion. I think that if you're asking for some guidance, I don't think the board is coming over saying this is the best idea we've ever heard. Whatever we can do as a board to help you, you're not hearing that. We're saying, we'd rather not be involved with this. We think there's a lot of hurdles, but the message back to the company is, yeah, this was a very lukewarm reception, and no one's bending over backwards saying, hey, we're gonna make this happen for you, because it's kind of a long drawn out thing here.
It is, yeah, and again, like I said, my only purpose was to, again, I think the commissioners, as well as trustees, got a lot of information from Bruce on the research, so Mr. Russell, thank you for kind of collaborating with that. And again, the township's always had a great working relationship with the county, we look forward to continuing that. Again, just wanted to sort of make sure we were all gaining a little education on this subject and determining what makes the most.
Appreciate it, Scott. This is a public meeting. Yes, sir, you have a comment on this?
Yeah, Greg Meyer, Ohio State University Extension Agent, work with the ag community quite a bit. This isn't the only township you got going on. They're working in Turtle Creek right now too. On the east side, 741, 63, because basically the guys who wanna lease it like to talk to me about what rental rates go for, trying to figure out what their price point's gonna be to try and lease it. So Washington's not the only place, so.
Once they're gonna go through this Senate process that's been set up by the legislature, where they're gonna hold a public meeting, and they're gonna invite us to it, they're gonna give notice, then they're going to decide, and we get a veto right.
Get it, and
And somebody who was really interested in pushing alternative energy sources, I can only guess who that could be, has decided on this legislation. And
No, it's those who are fighting it. It's not those who are
okay,
for
maybe
pro
it is.
developers. It's
So, but then they've required that they give public hearing. Well, I assume that they had an ability to go through this board before to get this done.
But I suspect that this comes from the wind development, because the wind
The wind people don't like the solar people?
no.
The farmers and the
No,
cowboys
it's the
don't get
wind
along?
development that has happened up in the northwestern part of the state. It requires lots and lots of land.
And it is, you know, the solar arrays in many instances takes land, but it's not as obtrusive to someone's view. It doesn't create this noise that you hear about.
Birds aren't flying
And
into
it's
it.
been very controversial, and so my suspicion would be that this legislation stems from those fights, bitter fights that have gone on for well over a decade as the wind development has been going on. You know, I can't, but clearly this is about providing local government with a veto right over what is locating. It's not a pro-development, a pro-solar or pro-wind development.
Well, it does put up a lot of roadblocks because it requires them to hold a public meeting in a weird way. Then it requires to give us all notice and a lot of other people notice, and then it gives us the political jurisdiction that has zoning authority has the right to veto. Is that what it does, Bruce?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, or limit it, restrict it.
Yeah, right, I get it. Either limit the size or veto it
And
entirely.
if it came before you, in Washington Township at 71 Wilmington Road, you can say, we're gonna reduce it so you, which I kinda like, you can do it certain places.
Here's
but
100
you're not
acres.
gonna do it on these places that have
Right.
a lot more potential.
Okay.
Well, staff, I appreciate the change of direction here, that, you know, staff's here, you hear where we're going with this, that hopefully you can draft, start giving us some options of what we want this to look like. And then on your specific question, I think we've already asked and answered, and Mr. Meyer, good to see you, and thank you for your comments. But yeah, and again, nothing I've said is disparaging to, you know, alternative forms of energy. I think those are important, and they need to go somewhere. But in Ohio's second fastest growing county, where we are literally going to be a hub of activity along this corridor for high-tech, you know, manufacturing jobs are right around the corner, in my personal opinion. There are other communities that would bend over backwards to have this, and I think these folks should focus on those. So we're gonna move on. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Mr. Cook? I was so far ahead of time, and now we're so far behind.
Go faster, Ryan.
Don't bury the lead.
Let's go straight to it.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Ryan Cook with the Warren County Regional Planning Commission. I just wanted to have a work session with you guys today to discuss fire access roads as they pertain to the Warren County subdivision regulations. So after reviewing some subdivisions recently, we became aware of a fire code standard that, and so I would like for you guys to be aware of that and see if that's something that we want to possibly incorporate within our Warren County subdivision regulations. So currently our regulations, letter B, so anything with 50 units or more requires 2 public road accesses for, mainly that was for public safety reasons, and that number came about through our office and the engineer's office. Currently, the fire.
What does 2 access points mean? Because this came up, you know, in this Crooked Tree development, not Crooked Tree, Shaker Run.
Woods.
Shaker Run development. It was adjacent to a Shaker Run thing.
Correct.
And, you know, so it's an access maybe off of 63, there's an access off of Green Tree, but then when you actually get into the area, it funnels through one roadway. And there was like, oh, that's just one access. And it actually has to have 2 accesses to this because it's separate from Shaker Run. So what does 2 access points mean?
2 access points from my perspective is 2 public roadway accesses regardless of
So if it's a different
dedicated
subdivision,
right-of-way.
say it's a different subdivision that has access through another subdivision, then that new subdivision has to have not the access through the previous one that's got maybe 5 or 6 different accesses is only one access because they only have one road going into it. And then you gotta have an access outside of that access, is what you're saying.
Yes.
However, the applicant can seek a waiver of that and rationalize whatever they want, including the points you're just making. And that comes before the Regional Planning Commission Executive Committee in an administrative hearing. And that body can decide whether there's justification from deviating from that requirement.
Yeah, but it wasn't, when we were doing this in, Bruce, in Shaker Run, was the two-access argument merely because the Turtle Creek Township trustees were saying, we don't think it's safe to do this, and it wasn't because we had this rule?
It is because we had this rule, because it was more than 50.
No.
Yeah.
You're talking about apples and oranges here. First of all, it came before you on a site plan review.
Right now.
Okay, and they ask you to consider under the site plan review the access issue. And in the review criteria under zoning site plan, you have the authority to look at those factors that we have in our code and decide whether they need more than one access.
Right, and that's, so my point is that this now codifies the two-access. That's why we're making a change today.
No.
No, it's not?
This
I just wanna understand.
already exists under the subdivision regulations, which you do, the RPC Executive Committee makes the decision on. The only reason Ryan is here, once again, is to seek your input and direction before the staff goes down some path, because for whatever reason, even when you have a regional planning commission, the subdivision regulations, when there's a text amendment, the final decision is made by the Board of County Commissioners. That's the only reason he's here. And so he wants to get some direction from you about this separate thing that relates to fire apparatus having a different access. But just to be clear, on the Shaker Woods development, that was site plan review zoning, Turtle Creek appropriately came before you and said, we need more than one access as a development standard, and you had the decision to say, yeah, I think you do.
Because it was more than 50 units.
No, had nothing to do with 50 units. The 50 units is the subdivision regulation. If you independently thought, well, because it has 50 or 40 or 30 or whatever, it needs to, that's kind of your discretion. That there isn't a numerical number under the zoning code. In fact, we don't even have a standard in the zoning code for a number of accesses.
So what is this?
It says right here, for subdivisions with less than 50 units, a minimum of one.
And that you're reading from the subdivision regulations, not the zoning code. So those are two distinct documents. And you don't have, you have two votes out of the number on the executive committee of the RPC.
So you're saying this is potentially a zoning change, or a text amendment in zoning, if we wanted to go.
No, I'm saying that staff, the RPC staff is wanting input from you. Do you want them to consider a subdivision text amendment because you have final say on subdivision regulation text? Do you want them to start looking at drafting a subdivision text amendment that incorporates this concept about fire apparatus? Because there's a provision in the subregs that expressly gives the RPC the authority to have a subdivision regulation of access of firefighting apparatus, and they're proposing something different than access.
Okay, so now, how does this change in terms of our authority, Bruce, with regard to this matter than what it is today? So if we adopt this, or we say, yeah, go down this road, we want to do something like this to establish this and do whatever is the prerequisites to getting this done. If we were ultimately to adopt this, what does that mean in terms of changing what happens now?
Let Ryan answer that.
Okay.
So here is the section in the fire code that I think is at least applicable. So developments of 1 or 2 family dwellings where the number of dwelling units exceeds 30 shall be provided with separate and approved fire apparatus roads. So basically what that means is it needs to have a public road access and an additional an additional fire apparatus road available to the development when it exceeds that 30.
At a minimum, it could be 2 public roads.
Correct.
But at a minimum, 1 public road and then a fire truck lane.
Correct.
Which is something, and honestly, this came up, I can't believe I was actually talking about this stuff outside of one of these meetings, but I was talking to an engineering buddy, about, the 50-unit rule, and he's like, 50? Where we are, it's 30, and the fire chief, that's part of the revised code or what? I'm like, what? So then, all of a sudden, the Ohio Fire Code says it is 30. And so then it's, well, if that's in the Ohio Fire Code, should we be approving these subdivisions that have one way in and out, if the fire code tells us contrary to that? I mean, are we liable for that? If all of a sudden we allow a 40-home subdivision to go in, and sure enough, there's a tornado, and there's a house burning down inside of there, does that family have any cause against us of, you know, this rule right here, Bruce, says you have to have 2, and we're not doing it.
I think that there would be immunity under your fact pattern, but nevertheless, that's why they're here. They've discovered that the fire code, it's been brought to their attention, the fire code says the 30. We looked at their authority under the subregs, and it says they can have a subreg relating to access of firefighting apparatus. And the staff wants to know from this board, before they spend any time on it, is this something that the board would like to see brought to them? And I think it would be helpful, Ryan, especially for Commissioner Grossman, is if you had an example you could show him.
Absolutely. So here is an example of Highlands at Heritage Hill, which was approved with 43 residential lots, and the residential access was from Columbia Road, which was on the eastern portion of the screen. They were approved with a emergency access drive, which is illustrated in red. That is for emergency access only. It is a non-dedicated road on an open space lot for emergency access only, and it is a gated entrance off of State Route 42.
So that's Mike Williams's development in Union Township. You'll remember it.
Oh, sure, it was the one where the Lebanon people did, or that company said, it's gonna be terrible, because we're gonna cause a problem to these people. The main access is off Columbia Road, and you got an emergency access off of 42, I know exactly where that is. I get
Right.
it.
Right, right there at the railroad tracks.
Yeah, it's a beautiful development, it was a homeorama, I got it.
Yeah, but the point is that there's 2 accesses. And
Correct.
so that's what I'm thinking of, are we, you know, especially from a culpability standpoint, it's like we're being told to do something, and then are we just saying no to that?
We just haven't done it, and I think it's important to point out that most of these that you see in our community, they have some sort of crash gate or key gate that the fire department can get through, like that one there on the old rat farm that comes off 42 at the railroad tracks. It's not an access where we started.
Did they do that because of state law or because of something we had?
That's a great question that I don't know the answer to. That
Well, I
was
mean,
approved
if
before.
I'm changing, so have you gone out to find out if we make this change, what the Home Builders Association and the developers who would have to comply with this, what they think?
No, absolutely. I think so with the, you know, if this is some direction that you would like us to do that, we can certainly, I think it would be important to research what other regional planning
Yeah,
commission
I think
that's the
regulations
predicate before we
are,
do
work with the
anything.
local agencies, and then discuss with the HPA,
Sure,
because
I
we
mean,
know they're the
this is
ones
just,
most impacted.
from direction, do we think this is an issue? From my standpoint, it is an issue, and, now again, I see it in black and white, it's not 50 even, now it's 30.
Right.
And again, I like having 2 ways in and out, and especially now if we know it's at least a minimum of a fire road.
Correct.
Yeah, that's all it is. It's a minimum of a fire road. It's not an access based on
But,
30.
but in our subdivision regs, over 50,
Correct.
it is 2 separate roads
Correct, but for ingress
with
and egress.
waiver abilities.
Yep, with ingress and egress ability. This is something separate.
Okay, fair enough.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, can we take a bathroom rest break for a second?
Yep.
Is that okay?
Do we have anything else, or
Yeah,
what?
we've got several things.
Yeah, we'll take a 5-minute recess. If there's a motion for that,
Yep.
So moved.
and yes.